In PlanetScale, you can either choose metal disks, which are fixed size, or to have your storage be on network attached storage, like EBS or persistent disk. For the latter option, we give you a bunch of options to control the sizing and the scaling and the capability of those disks. So let's talk about the options here. The way that you get here is from your database. You go to your cluster configuration and then over to the storage tab. And in here, there's a few options for how to configure things. So the first one is your minimum disk size. And by default, you're going to see some low value here, but you can configure this to say, I never want my disk to be auto-scaled lower than a certain amount. So perhaps that's 100 gigabytes. And as you make these changes, you can see how that's going to affect the monthly cost for the database. You can also specify auto-scaling limitations. So the default here is 4 terabytes basically, but if you want, you can punch that up to larger amounts if you know that your database is going to grow really big beyond that. And then beyond just the actual capacity of the storage, you also have capability to customize the IOPS configuration and the bandwidth. So this particular one is a database that's backed by Amazon EBS. And so these are options that typically on a GP3 EBS volume, you can configure these things. So you can say, I want 4,800 IOPS rather than the default 3,000. And maybe you want to achieve more bandwidth, right? You want 300 megabytes a second of bandwidth instead of the default 125. So these are things that you're going to want to configure if you're having performance issues. And you can go over and look at your insights or your metrics page to figure out if you might be bumping up against one of these limitations. And then if it seems like you are, you would go in here, make adjustments, and then queue those changes. If you're doing a migration from one database to another, it's really important to check these storage options ahead of time, because if you know, hey, I'm going to be migrating a database that's 300 gigabytes onto this database, I want to make sure that I've scaled the disk up quite a bit. In fact, it's recommended to go beyond what you're actually the size of your source database, because due to table bloat and things like that in Postgres, sometimes after migrating, it can look bigger until it's had a chance to do vacuums and compact the rows. So make sure you set this ahead of time before you start a really big migration.